concern you. The news that hits the most is the news that hits closest to home. Tonight, we have a trio that is well experienced, well gifted, and full of insight, here to shed some light and understanding onto our subject of today, which is the untold cost of the protests, the untold cost of Maandamano. And here to help me break this down, to help us rather break this down, we have three people with us. Starting on my left, we have Reverend Dr. Emily Obwaka. We are so we're pleased to have you.
Well.
She is experienced, and her experience runs into the decades. She's currently the executive director of Teen Challenge Kenya, but part of her experience is in public health and policy and governance, and she is an ordained minister serving at the Christ is the Answer Ministries. Next to her is a gentleman by the name of Chris Otieno. Chris is a security expert, but that's the very least of the hats that, at least one of the hats that he wears. He is a risk security, public and occupational safety expert. He wears other hats like health and environmental management, like mentorship. And he's a member of the Protective and Safety Association of Kenya, that is PROSAC, as well as the Director of Partnerships and Resource Mobilization at the Kenya Professional Association of Criminologists. We're establishing these bona fides because they are important. And to my right, last but definitely not least, is Stella Agara. Stella is a governance and youth development specialist. Let's say that. But that's a title that covers a lot of experience and a lot of insight, spanning close to a decade and a half. Welcome.
Thank you.
Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this is the conversation we wish to have, the untold cost of Maandamano. The premise is this. We have a situation on our hands. We're seeing people dying on our screens every day. But it looks like hardline stances, blame games, and to some degree apathy. That's what we're dealing with here. We want to find out why. And perhaps we can start there. Stella, what do you see when you look at your country?
Thank you, Victor. I see a number of things. First, I see a people or a citizenry that is really suffering, is really struggling under a difficult economy, struggling under difficult circumstances, and now being denied an opportunity to participate in business and make the little money that they should be making to fend for themselves. I also see a confused citizenry because they participated in citizen participation as far as the finance bill is concerned. They were consulted, they give their opinions, and many of them are saying they were not heard. Apart from that, I see politicians who have decided that they're going to make the country a playing field for their interests. And for this reason, they have decided to take hardline stances so that they can allow for these kinds of protests to happen. And unfortunately, it's the citizens that continue to suffer. Unfortunately, those who are bearing the biggest brunt of this, especially now, from the reports we were getting until today, is the women and the children in our society. So for me, I see a society that has refused to dialogue. And unfortunately, it's making very many people suffer in the process.
Wow. Dr. Obwaka, what do you see when you look at your country, Kenya?
I see an unfolding picture of growing hopelessness if we don't arrest the things as they go forward. Why do I say this? This is not the first time we are seeing a situation of anarchy, a situation of not listening to one another, stories from the past visiting us, and they are not being light as it looks like. And you see that we are at a place where, which way forward? We don't see light. And what that is doing, and that's the greatest thing for me, is sending a message to those who are growing up in this environment, those who are watching their leaders behave in a certain way that is not tolerant, is not embracing of one another, is not molding us into citizens that are building a country that is going anywhere. So for me, there is a sense of, who will bring the voice of reason? there is a call really to really say who will bring sanity to those who are holding on to positions that are not benefiting us at all. And my prayer is that we will break this silence in a way that will take us forward. Absolutely.
Chris, what do you see?
I see a lot of things in my country now, Victor. What I see, first of all, is a revelation of pre-existing fault lines in our society. And these pre-existing fault lines are also being aggravated. And this aggravation is coming in very many ways. First and foremost, we are seeing references to incompetence from both sides. We have seen our security persons go out there, of course, with the instructions of what to do, but some of them express themselves in the most brutal way, all right? And the accusations or lawsuits that will come from the brutality that is being meted out there will be massive in numbers. I've seen countrymen dying, innocent countrymen dying out there. I have seen women and children, just like Stella said, bearing the brunt of all these. And I've seen political class who are not willing to give up their stance. They're not looking at this country as a fabric that should stay united, but looking at it as what is the interest of my side, what is the interest of my side, and what guides the interest of my side. It is my personal interest. So I am seeing revelations and aggravations of all these pre-existing fault lines that really touch on the safety nets of our society.
Right. Sometimes they say in the fog of war, the reasons why we're fighting are lost. Stella, would you take us back, perhaps, take a step back and look at the larger reasons of why we're having this protest right here?
Absolutely, and I think we must, because that is where the conversation that must be held is situated. And it is also extremely important that we establish the things that are important in this conflict and the issues that could be put to rest until the main issues are resolved. We have had elections before that have been marred with a lot of violence and discrepancies and irregularities here and there. And so in the last election, there were a number of people who were not happy, including the members of the opposition. And a ruling was made by the court that then, of course, confirmed that our current president is going to be holding a 5-year term. Obviously, the opposition was not happy about that, and there are certain things that they wanted to see happening. Initially, when the conversations on protests started, there were supposed to be protests about the opening up of the server, ensuring that the citizens' voice is heard, re-establishing democracy in the nation. But then the finance bill came along. And the finance bill came along at a time when the citizens already had grievances that they had been mobilized around. So this situation then was made a little bit more difficult by the fact that the conversation on the finance bill has not happened in a way that is inclusive, has not happened in a way that allows the citizens to vent. It has also happened around a situation where the entire world is dealing with a recession. Economic recession that is affecting many economies, and so Kenya has not been an exception. We were suffering under very heavy debt. We were at the risk of defaulting in repaying our debts, and certain decisions had to be made, critical decisions had to be made to ensure that then this country continues being a going concern for the coming days. Unfortunately, the government of the day has made a decision to tax citizens and collect more from citizens who are already feeling like they're hard-pressed to take care of themselves, are already struggling. Many of them, if you've heard from the comments they make, is that they're sleeping hungry on a daily basis. Kenyans wouldn't make such a claim if it was a lie, And so we are faced with citizens who are struggling to survive, struggling to provide for their children, struggling to fit their resources within the economy as it is right now, and then they are now being asked to give some more. Unfortunately, we also have a government that the citizens do not trust as far as corruption is concerned, because they feel like even if they give more, some of these resources will not even go into the purposes that they have been intended for, including the housing levy and provision of public services, which is an important component of tax justice. If I was to summarize, that is how I would put it.
That's, in a nutshell, why we're here. Mm-hmm. But do you think in the discussion, in the push and pull, that this is apparent, that the issues at hand are apparent? We'll come to that in a moment. In the meantime, let's take a quick break. But here's how you can get in touch with us and take part in this conversation that we're having. At TV47 News on Twitter, at Muyakane on Twitter as well. 2247 is the SMS line. We'll be right back. Please don't go anywhere.
Hey, habari madam. Leo unataka gari ya kuni upgrade, eh?
Welcome back to Insight, and tonight we're talking about the untold cost of the Maandamano that we are having. Stella, you were telling us about the reasons for where we are right now. And my question for you just before we went on break was, is that clear in the push and pull? Are we clear about what we're really fighting for?
I actually
or have we lost it?
I actually don't think, and I'm glad you've asked that question, because even as we went for the break, I started feeling like there's something important that I did not say. What we are fighting for is not very clear, and the reason why it's not clear is because there are political interests that have been mixed alongside the interests of Kenyans. Unfortunately, the conversation on the political interest is being hyped by the politicians because it's an easier platform for them to fight over, and it's an easier platform for them to disqualify each other over. So when they fight over, for example, the issue of nusu mkate and whether or not the former prime minister is going to be given nusu mkate or not, it allows the theatrics to continue and shadows the real issues that Kenyans are complaining over. I don't think you have had too many Kenyans commenting, at least on the microphone to the media, that they are fighting for Baba to be given a seat. Majority of them are saying the life is too expensive, we cannot afford unga. Majority of them are saying fuel is expensive, and that is the conversation that citizens are having. For you to see a huge number of citizens staying at home, not participating in, rather staying at home and not participating in the economy on the days when a protest has been called, it doesn't mean that many of them would not want to be on the streets. It just means that some of them do not have the courage to be on the streets. But if called upon to participate in the conversations, and we've seen on social media platforms, a lot of them are feeling the weight of the economy. This is something that cannot be ignored. There are many economies in the world that have suffered under this kind of oppression when governments believe that they can actually take hardline stances at this time of economic recession. It's not wisdom to take a hardline stance when you're dealing with hungry people, because hungry people, Victor, are very unreasonable people.
Right.
What must be done for the right voices to be elevated is for us to mute the political voices. Is it possible for all of us, including the media, and I'm glad today this conversation is focusing on the untold cost, for the media to focus on those issues and ignore the political innuendo until this matter is resolved? Because we as Kenyans know what is important, we know what is on the table, and on those matters, the former Prime Minister and His Excellency the President do not have an option but to have a conversation on how this is going to be resolved. Right. Even if they don't have a conversation amongst themselves, at the end of the day, this will have to be resolved for this economy to proceed.
Something has to give.
Something has to give.
Dr. Reverend Obwaka, you mentioned hopelessness in what you see in the country that you belong to. Part of your work is dealing with teens, dealing with drugs and alcohol addiction.
Yes.
This hopelessness is certainly one of the things that actually drives people into substance abuse.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that cost, and what precedents are we setting for our people, for our young people? And perhaps how can we get out of that?
Well, the thing is, if a person doesn't see any light tomorrow in how they'll deal with the issues that are very real in their lives, they're going to try and cope
And indeed, we are seeing a shooting up of suicide rates.
Absolutely. Because if you look left, right, there's no hope anywhere. You're not being represented by your leaders. What little fabric you had to live on has been torn apart in your home, in your neighborhood, in your family. Then you're going to try and reach out to anything that will help you get past one day to another, which is why many young people reach out for alcohol, drugs, and other life-controlling issues. And you find that at the end of the day, down that spiral, there is a push to life is not worth living. And that's why the suicide levels have gone up.
Right.
What can we do about it is realize as leaders, we are carrying the generation with us in what we are talking about, in how we are helping things come together or not come together. We are the ones who need to change the script at the national level as well as at the family level.
But do you think that realization is something that is happening right now? Do you think our leaders, who are our reflection as a society, do you think they're aware of this?
They are not aware of it. I believe they are looking at their interests, they are looking at today, they are looking at how can we benefit out of this. And I really agree with my colleague here because the fact that we have gotten the political dimensions mixed with the real issues that Kenyans are going through means that the politicians then are riding on the real issues. They want to get mileage from the difficulties that Kenyans are going through. So they have sympathy because Kenyans are going through a real situation of hardship and despair, but that ought not to be. They need to stop and say, how do we correct this? How do we ensure that our young people are not sliding down the path of hopelessness because they don't see any hope, in things working out tomorrow?
Absolutely. And I believe it's the good book that says, what shall the righteous do when the foundations are broken?
Absolutely.
The foundations of our society are breaking.
They are broken.
Can you give us some hope? Can you give us some advice? Talk to your people.
We need to begin where we must begin, in that every one of us is born or in the image and likeness of God. We all have hope at the end of the day. The fallacy might be looking at someone else to give me hope. I need to realize that I was put on this earth with a purpose. And if I get hold of that purpose, that hope that is in my Creator, I can navigate even through the hardest situation. We have more help in us than we really care to embrace. We have more hope than we really see. When we look at the things naturally, there is no hope. But within us, there is absolute hope because we are made in the image and likeness of God. And we are innovative, we are creative, we are human beings who can navigate places that are dark and deep. You think of stories of the past and the slavery stories, and how people found themselves. Yes, and they survived that. So we are not hopeless. We're not helpless. We look at our land, yesterday on TV, seeing people go back to the land, look at, things that they can harness out of the natural environment. This should actually cause us to say, hey, wait a minute. We are not going to put our eyes on those who cannot change the situation for us. We're going to look further. We're going to look at what we can innovate in order to survive.
Brilliant.
And I think that's where we need to go with
well said.
Finding hope.
Well said indeed, Doctor.
Yeah.
Chris, we're seeing vigilante groups rising up. We're seeing people finding weapons to protect their properties. We're seeing hopeless youth, jobless youth resorting to the streets for grievances that nobody's willing to hear, or perhaps nobody is willing to articulate. What is the cost on security and the feeling of safety in our homes, in our estates, and what is that costing us?
It is costing us a lot of money. In terms, for example, you heard the other day the governor of Nairobi said the amount of money Nairobi lost in that one day. Just this morning, the Matatu fraternity mentioned the amount of money they lost this morning. So the lack of provision of security, or the lack of that structure to provide a safe and secure environment for business to operate, has huge ripple effects, all right? If we were to quantify that, just also yesterday, the president of Tanzania mentioned that investors are moving from Kenya to Tanzania because of the fear of lack of tranquility in the country. The gentlemen that we are speaking about, the young guys, unemployed and hopeless, what are we seeing them do? We are seeing this as a class of guys who would want to go out and vent what is deep inside them, in the fact that I am hopeless, I don't see a future ahead of us. But look at it, Victor, this way. Yes, we know what we are fighting for. It is clear. The cost of living is very high, and that is not going to go down very soon. But then also we are saying the lack of leadership to show us a better tomorrow in terms of how they're going to articulate what they say in public, the kind of structures they're going to put in place to accommodate the next coming time is lacking. Just a few days ago, one of our big companies shutting down. Why? Because of lack of an export license. What does that shutting down mean? More and more youths are going to go into the job market without a source of revenue or without a revenue stream. And what does that mean to them? They will want to go and find something to enable them to put food on the table. And they will resort to anything. Mention it.
Recapture this?
Anything.
How do we recapture this sense of safety, Chris, as we wind up?
The sense of safety, recovering that, would mean that we do a lot of things. First is restructuring. We need, first of all, to have deliberate conversations along reconciliations and acceptance. Am I going to accept what you tell me, despite that you're in the opposition or you're in the government? And we say, if it is right, it is important for me to accept it. Let's look at that as a future for the nation. We approach these issues from a unified perspective, not from a divided or political divided perspective. The more we do that, the more we draw away from it. So that conversation, reconciliation, unity of purpose must be something that must be very critical in all our discussions, and the willingness to really have those institutions in place.
Right. Good people, this is a massive conversation. It's a massive conversation that clearly we cannot all cover in this one sitting. But I'm happy about one thing. We have triggered a conversation. We can see on our social media pages, people are talking about it, and we encourage you to keep talking about this. And we encourage you also to be ambassadors and champions of what we're talking about here tonight, to make sure that the untold cost is no longer untold, but it's addressed as well. Once again, thank you so much for coming. I'm afraid we're completely out of time. This is unprecedented right here. But I hope we can call upon you at another time to come back and continue in this conversation. I'm informed that Ahmed Bahaj and the sports team have something of a blockbuster waiting for you. I'll give you 2 words, or rather 3 words: Mandonga, Mtu Kazi, and Sugunyo. We'll tell you more about that once we are out. But thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen and ladies. I apologize for we've run out of time, but I appreciate you for what you've been able to share with us in the time that we have. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching. The conversation continues at TV47 News on Twitter. 2247 is the SMS line, and my Twitter handle is at Muyakane. Stella's Twitter handle is at Nyar Agara. Chris, yours is quite a mouthful, at CMMOO Otieno. Did you hear that? At CMMOO Otieno. And what's your Twitter handle? Where can people get you? At Teen Challenge Kenya. At Teen Challenge Kenya. Continue with the conversation. Absolutely. And once again, let's meet every Tuesday and every Thursday right here on the Daily Report. Good night, and God bless you.